morning, I'm Tessa Dunlop. I'm coming to you from Ispra in Italy. I'm a PhD candidate at the Autonomous University of Barcelona, and I'm part of the Magic Nexus project. So I've been looking at the issue of energy efficiency because I find it fascinating. It's such a simple concept, which I think has helped it's become quite popular as a scientific concept, as a general idea, and in policy. But when you look a little bit deeper, actually, energy efficiency is quite complex because of the many different ways you measure it, because of its many different applications, and now it overlaps in so many different policy areas. So given this complexity, I wonder, why hasn't anyone looked back over time, especially in the EU, to see how this concept has changed? Because there seems to be this assumption in the literature often that energy efficiency emerged in the 1970s, and the concept is as a response to the global oil crisis, and that the concept hasn't changed much since then. But my research tells quite a different story. In fact, it shows that the concept has changed dramatically over 7 decades, and I'll show you what I mean. So here we go. Oh, these are the documents. So this is from the 1950s, and you can see that the concept here is seen as a very simple technical conversion. You can see right here, it's seen as a ratio. Now, fast forward to the last decade, and energy efficiency has become quite complex. You can see it with new concepts. It's been attributed to new concepts such as energy efficiency improvement. And here you can see all the benefits that are attributed these days to energy efficiency, including resource management, local air pollution, employment. So energy efficiency these days is seen not just as a simple measure, but as the magic solution to many different problems. And to look at these documents, and I'll just actually go back to the slide to show that the documents that I looked at over 7 decades. These include things like communications to the Commission and from the Commission, and directives, and even going back before the European Union existed to when it was the European communities. So to look at these documents, I applied the lens of Deborah Stone. She's quite a well-known policy scientist. And I think she looks at the concept of motherhood issues, which are common themes that are debated in politics. And these include things like equity, security, welfare, and efficiency. And these motherhood issues, while many people would generally support them in the abstract, when it comes down to implementation, this is where conflicts arise. And that's where the job of the policy analyst comes in, to look beneath the rhetoric and see, well, what are we actually talking about with these values? And I think this theory is quite useful for energy efficiency in particular, because I think it works in the same way as these motherhood issues. In the abstract, it's something that people would say, we agree with it, but when it comes down to it, really, there's many different conflicts about who benefits from energy efficiency measures and policy. So this is one issue of a motherhood issue of equity, and you can see here there's 2 kids. Everyone would agree with equity when you first hear about it, but this girl is saying, my body, being a bigger machine, requires more fuel. And the boy's upset about that because he feels he's not getting a fair share of the slice. So these are some of the issues we're looking at. So Deborah Stone, to analyse these documents, she looks at lots of different criteria, including problems, how problems are framed and solutions, how actors are referred to and how decisions are justified. But for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to focus just on problems and solutions because I think it's quite interesting where over the 7 decades, you can see that problems actually seem to be quite uniform. So I didn't see much change in the way that problems were framed. And these were generally framed in terms of, okay, where we don't have enough energy, we're too dependent on energy imports and prices are too high. So, and this is often a doom and gloom approach to say, well, if we don't do anything about these problems, then the economy is going to suffer and the future of European society is at risk. But what's interesting is that the solutions I've seen is different across the decades. So maybe it's no surprise that in the 1950s and 1960s, the solution is predominantly atomic energy. But then in the 1970s, it starts to become about the rational use of energy, and energy efficiency is still a small part of this idea at that stage. Then in 1980, energy efficiency becomes very prominent. And interestingly, it takes on many different economic concepts, and especially like rhetoric about the markets and we need to create an energy market. And perhaps this is no surprise given the discourse, the major discourse at the time, strong neoliberalism discourse around the world, brought about by proponents such as John Maynard Keynes and other economists. So then what I found, and you know, you could see maybe this is a response to the major recession of the time. So a lot of the focus is on reducing costs. But then after that, this economic focus remains throughout up until today. And I would say it even becomes more like individually focused. So solutions are very individual, very markets focused. It goes from we need to foster an energy market and right up to today we need to foster an energy efficiency market. And how we're going to do that, we're going to invest, we're going to reduce prices, we're going to change billing practices, and we're going to have smart meters. And you know, there's this real focus on the consumer, the end-use consumer, and energy efficiency appliances, which again is very different than what we saw in the 50s and 60s when it was just a simple methodology. And so you look at these issues and you think, well, yeah, what should we be looking at here with this strong markets focus? And there have been some criticisms of neoliberalism over the last couple of years because of its you know, perceived inequalities. But here I'll turn to Deborah Stone again, who makes a dichotomy in efficiency policy more generally. She says it's very common that you do have this strong markets focus. And she contrasts this with the idea of community. So what's the problem here? Is that she sees the markets as being this individual transaction where each player is seen to have a rational interest to get the thing they want at the least possible cost. And she says, well, real life doesn't really work like that. Real life is based on complex relationships, collaboration, loyalties, trust, and we need to acknowledge these things in policy. So I look to energy efficiency policy specifically with this idea. And I think about some of the results that came out of MAGIC, which just generally have talked about if we're going to think about a sustainable future, we really need to implement policy that takes into account shared solutions rather than individual solutions, because, you know, things like electric cars are fantastic, but it's not a sustainable solution if everyone has an electric car. And the same thing goes for energy efficiency. We have more powerful cars, bigger houses, which are maybe technically more energy efficient, but they use more energy overall. And so I think in this scenario, we may need to open up the concept of energy efficiency a bit more to take into consideration, shared housing solutions, energy communities, more public transport, perhaps electric public transport. And actually, some people have been looking at this idea. There's a small movement in Europe called the Sufficiency Movement, and so they're already looking at these things like putting that absolute limit on the concept and coming up with more common sense solutions with the challenges we face today, which are increasingly sustainability and resource shortage problems. So in conclusion, I think while you can see that the concept of energy efficiency has become more complex over time, in fact, in many ways, it's become narrower with this market's economic focus. And I think there's a lot of work that social scientists can do to better understand and open up the concept. So thank you for your time, and join us at the interactive session with Madalena Ripper. Ciao.